Brazilians are notoriously passionate when it comes to cheering on their favorite teams, but what happens when that passion goes a little too far? To answer that question, let's go back and gain some context. The core of Brazil's most popular team, MiBR, has a long and successful history. Prior to 2015, the Brazilian CSGO scene was essentially dead. Despite having teams which competed in 1.6 at a high level, Brazil had little to offer in the latest iteration of the game. This all changed when a team headed by Fallen and Fur surprised the world with a playoff appearance in the 2015 Katowice Major, the first ever Brazilian team to do so. Fallen and his crew finished with the same result in the next two consecutive majors, and it wasn't until 2016 when things really started ramping up for the Brazilians. With the acquisition of talents such as Taco from Fallen's Games Academy and Cold Zera from Team Dexterity, the team was set to go on to win 2 back-to-back majors, 10 LAN events, and spend 58 total weeks at the #1 spot in the world. See this picture? It's their trophy cabinet, and get used to it. You're going to be seeing a lot of it here in a few minutes. Anyways, the Brazilian success was no exception to the rule that all good things must come to an end. Following a line of disappointing results in early 2018, the team began looking for a replacement for longtime player Taco, and chose to expand their search to include more than just Brazilian players. They decided to pick up Stewie2K, who had previously been a part of the Cloud9 roster, which had won the major just 2 months earlier. Despite this promising signing, results remained lackluster, with success only being found in smaller events. 3 months later, in what was regarded as one of the worst kept secrets in CSGO history, SK made the move to MiBR, a legendary brand with roots from 1.6. Just 3 weeks later, it was announced that another former Cloud9 player, Tarek, would be replacing Boltz, leaving Made in Brazil with 2 American players. However, this roster only brought home a single trophy, which came from a smaller Tier 2 tournament titled Zodat Cup 2018. Since that win, despite roster changes, coach changes, and role changes, the core of MiBR has not won a single tournament since. Today, MiBR sits at number 16 on the world rankings, a shadow of their former #1 self. Now that we're all squared away with the history of MiBR, let's move on to Chaos, who entered the North American scene late last year. For context's sake in this whole situation, you only need to know a few things regarding Chaos. The first thing is the history of their IGL, Joshua, Steel, Nissan. Long story short, back in 2014, players' salaries were awfully low, and in an effort to make a little cash, Steel's team, iBuyPower, intentionally threw a match which they had bet against themselves on, turning them a profit. For a little while, the match went under the radar, until journalist Richard Lewis began digging into the case and revealed the information that he had found. As a result, Valve was not happy.
It looks as though some pro players have been banned by Volvo. Could, Deborn, Casey Foster, Dazed, Swag, AZK, Steel, RIP, ladies and gentlemen. People's careers have just been ended today by Volvo.
It was generally believed that these players' careers were over, until in mid-2017 when ESL and DreamHack lifted the ban on them, and they began competing at a semi-professional level.
Brats, what are you doing, bro? Have you checked that computer lately? You're unbanned, bro. Congratulations.
Shut the fuck up.
Since then, Steel is the only ex-iBuyPower player still active in CSGO, moving from teams such as Tort, Ghost, and now Chaos. The most important thing to remember about Steel in this whole situation is that he's still banned from participating in BAL-sanctioned events, meaning he can't play with the rest of his team in the RMR events this year. The other 2 players on the team you're going to want to remember are Leaf and Zeppa, the former being one of NA's youngest talents at only 16 years old. Now keep in mind, before both Leaf and Zeppa were signed with Chaos, their names were relatively unheard of in the NA scene, so their addition to Chaos is how most people are now aware of them. Finally, the last thing you need to know is regarding a popular Brazilian streamer, Galiz. Galiz is a former 1.6 veteran who played for the MiBR organization back in their heyday. He was part of the first Brazilian Counter-Strike team to play outside of Brazil, way back in the early days of the game. Galiz doesn't play anymore. Instead, he's become the biggest Brazilian Counter-Strike streamer on Twitch, broadcasting himself commentating games for hundreds of thousands of fans. He's so popular that he even outnumbers the official stream for a match, since a lot of Brazilians prefer his more casual and friendly approach to commentating a game. Now that the context is set, it's time to move on to the start of this feud. On June 22nd, MiBR and Chaos faced each other in the opening match for the CS Summit 6 NA qualifiers. This tournament was to be included in the regional major rankings, so of course, Steel had to be benched and replaced by the team's coach, MCE. Despite this disadvantage, Chaos managed to take Overpass before falling on Dust 2, and then eventually winning on Inferno in double overtime to pull off the upset.
Chaos toss a massive upset here to start off NA feeling righteous.
While Chaos fans were busy celebrating their team's victory, former MiBR player Tarek, as well as Fallen, began raising suspicion around some so-called aim locks which had occurred throughout the series. Notice how the clips are mainly between Zeppa and Leaf, and remember how I said before their signing to Chaos, they were relatively unknown names. This is what most likely caused these accusations, as any player who rises quickly to fame seemingly out of nowhere always faces some sort of accusations along the way. But here's where things start going bad. Like I mentioned earlier, Brazilians are some of the most die-hard fans in the world, and MiBR's fanbase is absolutely no exception. Already angry that their team lost, a lot of MiBR fans saw Fallen's accusations as permission to harass Chaos and their players with not only insults, but full-on death threats. This was escalated even further by the actions of Gawes, who began streaming the alleged aim lock clips and calling out Chaos as cheaters to his hundreds of thousands of fans. The abuse Chaos players received was so bad that Leaf ended up completely shutting down his Twitter to the public. Eventually, both Fallen and Tarek retracted their accusations, but the damage had already been done. In the following few days, the threats began to cool down, and to take their place was this picture of MiBR's trophy cabinet. To this day, you will still see this picture on every single Chaos tweet, alongside a comment regarding cheating and a poor Brazilian whose keyboard is stuck on all caps. All of that brings us to about a week ago. Things had sort of died down with the whole situation by then, until Chaos's Twitter page posted this image in response to the thousands of times the picture had been spammed to them. This didn't sit well with Taco, who's been relatively quiet for the whole situation so far. This kicked off yet another assault on Chaos's Twitter page, with images of Chaos's lack of trophies being spammed, as well as the typical cheater comments. Along with the horde of MiBR fans was the MiBR Twitter page itself, poking fun at Chaos by mentioning Steel's ban. Steel responded with his own little jab back, and even tweeted out against Fallen for being two-faced, as well as towards Taco, questioning his CSPPA board member spot. It looked as if this was the end of the whole situation, until just yesterday when HLTV published an interview with Steel. In this interview, Steel covers things like the future of Chaos, their world ranking, and of course, the MiBR situation. Upon being asked what he thought about the players from the organization, he simply stated, "I think they're all idiots," and then briefly explained why he thought that way. Not 2 hours later, a popular Brazilian CSGO news site, draft5.gg, published an article with that quote being the headline. Unfortunately, I can't read Portuguese, but from what I understand, the article is essentially a translation of the HLTV interview with an emphasis on Steel's quote. So, once again, the war between Chaos and MiBR's fanbase kicked off. This time, a member of Team Imperial got involved, which is another Brazilian team. This player, Showtime, began arguing with Steel while continually bringing up his match-fixing past, and claimed that Steel was choosing to continue the controversy. The two went on to argue about accomplishments, while exchanging insults as well. And that's pretty much where we're at right now. No public apologies have been made either way, and the tension between these two teams are ridiculously high. Now, I've tried my best to remain as unbiased here as possible, and now that we have all the facts out of the way, it's time to dive into my own personal thoughts on the situation. First things first, Leaf and Zeppa are not cheating. Like I said earlier, every young up-and-coming player always has to go through cheat accusations. Even Fallen himself went through them back when he was on the rise. But let's dig into these clips a little deeper anyway. This clip on Long A. Zeppa clearly hears footsteps and points in that direction, not even coming close to locking onto the head. This one on Inferno Balcony. Leaf sprays down Taco, then jerks to the left. Near, but once again not on for his head. And another thing, even if he was cheating, this would literally be impossible. As a countermeasure to cheaters as well as a way to optimize FPS, enemies aren't drawn on the client's computer until they reach a certain area in relation to the player. Since all cheats are obviously client-side and not server-side, there would be no possible way for a cheat to lock onto a head that far away from the client. Now can I explain why Leaf jerked his mouse left? If I had to guess, he was probably either readjusting his mouse's position or anticipating a peek from a player hiding in the corner there. That's it. Now what about these overpass clips? For this one, he was spraying, so he was moving his mouse down. To move his mouse back to the center of his mouse pad, he jerked back up. Simple as that. As for this one, this might be the dumbest one yet. Because for one, he didn't lock anywhere close to the head, And 2, it's obvious he saw the flashbang coming from the smoke, which is why he pointed in the direction where it came from and then looked away. So now that it's painfully obvious that the cheating accusations are just a way to cope with the loss to Chaos, let's look back at the damage they could have caused. First, here's Rops. Rops faced a lot of accusations during his rise to the top. Here, he mentions the effect that they had on him mentally. Now let's think about this. Leaf not only had to go through this, but also death threats, hate messages, and insults, and the icing on the cake? He's 16. Can you imagine going through something like that when you're still years away from being considered an adult? The fact that Leaf never gave into the hate and is continuing to play is nothing short of astounding. So when you consider this, and then take into account that Fallen never even cleared Leaf's name to his fanbase, it makes it a lot harder to side against the rest of Chaos. And sure, Fallen said we should wait for evidence before picking a side, but by the time he said this, the damage had been done, and he never even apologized, at least publicly, to Leaf for the damage he caused him. And another thing, in the same tweet, he claimed he'd never like to accuse people of cheating before evidence is shown, which literally goes against exactly what he did with this tweet just 10 minutes earlier, which he never even deleted. So despite claiming he doesn't like accusing before evidence, and despite being through exactly what Leaf was going through, he still decided to tweet that out, fueling the fire against Chaos. But that's enough about that specific match. It's time to flash forward a bit and talk about what happened last week. So let's start with the initial tweet. Do I think Chaos was justified in tweeting it? I absolutely do. The main argument against them tweeting it is that it's disrespectful towards MiBR and their history. But do you know what else is disrespectful? Accusing a 16-year-old of cheating with little to no evidence. Plus, it was obvious Chaos wasn't trying to outright be disrespectful towards MiBR. They tweeted the image because that picture had been spammed to them for the past 2 months straight. It was directed to the fans, not the team. So Taco had 3 options here. 1. Ignore it. 2. Let it get to his head and tweet this out. Or 3. Take a friendly jab back at Chaos. The whole situation could have just been friendly banter between the two teams, but instead, we're left with this. But here's another thing. A few days ago, Richard Lewis came out with part 1 of an article detailing the hypocritical past of the core of MiBR. As much as I'd love to go into it, I don't want this video to turn into a full-on MiBR hate video, but I do want to touch on one event Richard pointed out, a dispute between Taco and JW from 2018. To summarize, Taco baselessly claimed that JW had been abusing a smoke bug he had been keeping to himself for over a month to gain an advantage. JW fired back, saying that it simply wasn't true and that he had made all other pros aware of the bug as well. Taco wasn't a fan of this response, and tweeted this back, which is now deleted. Now, I'm no expert, but it seems like Taco was being disrespectful to JW, his team, and his history. So, what makes it okay for him to do it to others, but not others to do it to him? To be fair though, this incident did happen about 1.5 years ago, and Taco very well could have matured in this time. But judging from his other recent tweets around the current situation, I'm sort of doubting it. Here's another one of those tweets. So Steel had begun laying out his own bait for MiBR players and fans, going off the joke that Fallen is two-faced. So what does Taco do? He crafts the most clever, witty, and complex comeback known to man, bringing up Steel's match fixing. Now, throughout this whole argument, I've sort of teetered between both sides, seeing things from both viewpoints, but when I read this, all my support for Taco just went out the window. I understand that MiBR and their fanbase are fans of living in the past, but this is literally the lowest hanging fruit possible. Any other response, literally anything else, I would have thought was funny and perfectly suitable. But the fact that Taco took the easy way out and pulled out the classic match fixing card, it's just pure lazy. The match took place 6 years ago in an environment much different from the one we have today. If you don't think people can change and be forgiven in that period of time, there's something wrong with your head. But hey, that's just my opinion. Hopefully, next time Taco can take longer than 10 seconds to make a comeback. So finally, that leads us to Steel's comment from his HLTV interview. I want to talk about why Showtime's response made absolutely no sense. Showtime claims that Steel is the reason the controversy is still around, implying that it has nothing to do with the hundreds of Brazilians still calling out Chaos as cheaters. The idea that the controversy would fade away if they stopped talking about it makes sense from one perspective, but it's simply not reality. There was a near 2-month gap between the initial CS Summit match and this tweet, where the players remained relatively quiet regarding the whole situation, yet the entire time, cheating accusations and more were being thrown around by MiBR fans, never fading away. And another thing, it's not like Steel went out of his way to make this insult to MiBR. He was being interviewed and was asked to give his honest opinion about them, and then backed up that opinion with solid reasoning. So I don't think Steel did anything wrong in that situation, and it's certainly not his fault this controversy is still ongoing. But that's about all I have to say about that situation. I'm sure more stuff will happen the second this video is posted, so maybe a part 2 will be in the near future. If you think I missed anything or maybe glossed over some important details, let me know in the comments or on my Twitter page. Till next time.